With great power comes the ability to answer a speed round faster than Barry Allen. Welcome to another episode of Movies and Me, and today I have perhaps one of the most special guests that I've ever gotten. He's the host of Marvel Movie News on the Popcorn Talk Network, and he can do a speed round like no one else. It's Coy Jandreau. What's up, buddy?
How you doing, man? Excited to be here.
Coy, I know you're a huge Spider-Man fan. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, and when I realized I wanted to do an episode related to Spider-Man and do it before Homecoming, I just had to get you as my guest, so I'm really glad you could be here. So, first off, what is it about Spider-Man that gives him such a personal connection to you?
Well, Spider-Man's an interesting character because he's one of the few characters I find that originally used his humor as a protective layer. Like, there's a lot of characters that have witty banter, but there's usually something else inside it. Spider-Man was one of those guys that literally, it's a showing of insecurity as strength. This man literally, doesn't know if he's going to survive the encounter, and instead of letting it get to him, he, protects himself with this barrier. But at the same time, he's literally a character that's always depressed and dealing with this responsibility thing. So, where you have Deadpool, and that's a guy that literally doesn't know any better. That's a guy that almost uses comedy as it's an autopilot. Whereas Spider-Man, there's a layer to it where he has to deal with the fact that he thinks he's done everything wrong, and then uses that barrier of comedy to help himself feel better and sleep at night. Arguably, Spider-Man is one of the more depressed characters you'll see. He feels like everything is his fault, but the man uses humor to survive. And that concept was always really interesting to me, especially when you're growing up a teenager trying to figure out what you're doing, trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong. Spider-Man was this amazing moral compass that used humor as the barrier between him and the world. And that, I think, is, as much as his mask protects him, humor protects him. And that's always been fascinating to me.
That's probably the most unique answer I've heard from a Spider-Man fan. Actually, just point it out, Delisha Renee sent that question, but she worded it a lot better than I could. And I know Spider-Man's been in film for a really long time, and I'd hate myself if I didn't at least bring it up, but the Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man movies from the 70s, I don't know if you saw those.
Oh, I have seen my Spider-Man, sir. That was funny because that was what I was afraid we'd ever get to. Before this Iron Man resurgence, before all this, this Marvel age we're living in, we had the Sam Raimis, and we had that time, but we never had a Marvel Spider-Man. If you look at the Sam Raimi movies, it's very clear that Sam Raimi is as integral to the telling of those stories as Spider-Man. There's a certain flavor. The 70s Spider-Man stuff was as much a product of its time as the 90s and the 2000s Spider-Man. So I think this Tom Holland Spider-Man is the first Marvel comic Spider-Man we'll ever have. So I don't shortchange the 70s ones because it made sense for the time. If you look at the Japanese shows, if you look at, everything is a piece of its time. You have Captain America punching Nazis. It's all a fabric of the time. So I think without the 70s ones, we wouldn't have gotten Sam Raimi ones. Without the Sam Raimi ones, we wouldn't have gotten Tom Holland, who is Spider-Man. That kid was born Spider-Man, and he just found the suit later. It's insane where we've gotten in 2017. That dude does backflips and, is that weird, geeky, charming, and all this stuff. And once again, without the breadcrumbs from the 70s, we wouldn't have landed where we are today. And so I appreciate every bit of medium Spider-Man's ever been in.
Even though Nicholas Hammond, I'm pretty sure, has forgotten he ever played Spider-Man. For his time, he was fine. And, of course, as we're recording this, it's the 15th anniversary of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, and that was the first superhero movie I ever remember watching as a kid. I was about 6 years old when it came out. Hell, I'm 21 now. I'm the same age as Tom Holland, so that's pretty fucking cool.
That is cool.
So, is there anything in the first Raimi Spider-Man that you could bring up as a favorite scene or anything like that?
So the Raimi Spider-Man's vital to me. The Raimi Spider-Man came out at the exact perfect time. I was 13. I remember seeing it on every date I went on. I remember them dating a girl and being the seventh time we were going to see Spider-Man. That age when you're 13 and all you really do is go to movies. That time in your life. And it was the first time I felt what I think a lot of the older generation felt about Star Wars. It was the first time I felt the magic of cinema in a way that it was representing my childhood on screen. And I believed that a man could do anything. I believed, the Christopher Reeve, you'll believe a man can fly. When Spider-Man happened in front of my eyes, it was one of the single most transcendent experiences I've ever had in the theater. I grew up reading Wizard Magazine, and Wizard Magazine, I remember 3 years earlier, had this full-page ad, and it was Leonardo DiCaprio as Spider-Man to be directed by James Cameron. And it said at the bottom in tiny, tiny print, parody. And I didn't know what that word was. I literally learned the word parody because I thought that was actually a poster for Spider-Man. I thought it was happening, and then looking up the word parody and my heart breaking. And I would have been like 10 years old. Like, how the hell would a 10-year-old know what the word parody is? So, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man was like the antithesis of that. It was like getting my childhood. It was like growing, and 13 is the perfect time to experience a superhero movie. So that whole movie was just glee. It was just, I'd read comics since I was 4. Like, that was just, it was everything I wanted it to be. And as you get older, it's natural to get cynical. The more experience you have in the world, the more you see how movies work. Now that I'm working in the film industry and have worked in the film industry for a decade, you watch a movie and it's really hard to remove yourself from it. Like, man, that extra was looking at the camera, and like, oh, I know how they did that shot, or like, oh man, he was phoning that in. And I didn't have that at 13. So arguably the Sam Raimi Spider-Man was the closest to that perfect bliss between being old enough to appreciate and young enough to not be cynical. And that whole movie, man, like the amazing red dress Mary Jane was in, that crazy goblin mask, the first time Willem Dafoe has the laugh, the Spider-Man flexing in the mirror because he suddenly has powers, like him catching all of that stuff on the tray in the lunchroom, the fight with Flash, like all of that was like a Ditko flavored Spider-Man, and I think the new one's going to be like a John Hughes meets Dick Ditko flavor, and it at the time was so far technologically more advanced than I ever expected it to be. Like, also didn't know CGI and stuff, so everything was just beautiful, man. That whole movie, top to bottom, happy.
And, of course, we can't bring up Sam Raimi's Spider-Man without bringing up Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. And I remember watching, you had Max Landis on Popcorn Talk one time. I know Max a bit too. He's a really great guy. And he described the Green Goblin in a way that I'm never going to forget. He said he's like Batman if Batman was also the Joker. And there's one scene with Dafoe's Goblin that I only just realized what the meaning of it was recently. Like, when he's on the rooftop and he says, like, in despite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. Originally, like, when I was a kid, I just thought he's just saying villain things. But on a more recent rewatch, I never realized that Norman Osborn was actually talking about himself in that scene. And that just blew my mind. So where do you stand on Dafoe's Goblin for this movie?
So my only problem with Dafoe's Goblin is that he looks more like the Green Goblin with his mask off than on. Willem Dafoe is so good and such a great actor that putting a piece of plastic over his face felt like abuse. I love Willem Dafoe's Goblin. I love the voice. I love how he portrayed it. I love the physicality. I love his father role. I really think that if it was like even 5 years later, we could have had a lot more fun because we'd be deeper into the comic world. And I'm not discrediting anything. Like, Sam Raimi's movies is amazing, but like we weren't at the point now where we can have a guy in a Crossbones outfit running around Africa and be like, yeah, that's real life. Like, we just weren't there. So they had to make do with what they had. And the only thing I don't really like about the Goblin outfit is that it was a Power Ranger suit. And that was the only thing that really I lose. You kind of lose some. When you make the Green Goblin an X Games player, you lose some shit. You know what I mean? So that was my only issue with the Goblin, is he didn't have that, like, fear. When I think of the Green Goblin, I think of the pure terror of Aunt May screaming. And that moment was almost captured, but the suit was just a little too plasticky for me to buy it. And the worst part is the animatronic suit they made before. You've seen the test footage.
Oh, yeah.
That thing will break your mind. That thing was horrifying. So my only issue isn't with Willem Dafoe, it's with the mask. And I love everything Dafoe did. I love the writing of it. I love that character. I think that Amazing Spider-Man notwithstanding, the Goblin legacy in cinema is what we need to focus on 4 or 5 movies in. Because the Goblin and Spider-Man are two sides to terrifying coins. Like, they're both scientists. They're both brilliant minds. There's the legacy. There's the serum. There's so much to play with if you take your time and do it right. And I think Sam Raimi's Spider-Man laid some amazing groundwork.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And even with the final fight between Green Goblin and the Spider-Man, they weren't afraid to make it all out hardcore violent. Like, he gets his ass absolutely kicked. And you don't see that a lot in a lot of modern day superhero films. It's usually like a big sky beam and gray minions and everything. And
don't get me started on space holes, man. I hate these space holes.
I'm kind of hoping, praying really, that's what they're doing with Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Michael Keaton as the Vulture. That's going to be more of like a one-on-one personal vendetta thing, just like how Raimi's Goblin was. And moving on from that, we got to talk about what a lot of people consider one of the best superhero movies ever made, and it's my personal favorite, and Spider-Man 2. And when I saw this for the first time, I didn't like it as much as Spider-Man 1 because that's a lot of nostalgia, but as I've gotten older, a lot of the themes in Spider-Man 2 really resonate with me, and Doc Ock I feel is one of the most underrated supervillain performances like ever in a comic book movie. Like, a lot of people talk Heath Ledger's Joker and Tom Hiddleston's Loki, but Alfred Molina's Doc Ock took a character that was so ridiculous from the comics and made him like this sort of grounded Shakespearean type tragic figure. So where do you stand on Spider-Man 2?
So I had a movie fight a few weeks back where I had to say any comic book performance that did not win an Oscar what was worthy of one. So obviously the Joker was out, because that isn't, in my opinion, I think my favorite performance. And my number 2 choice was Molina. My number 1 choice was Fassbender, because I think Fassbender is really underrated. Because the Fassbender Magneto thing is tricky. Alfred Molina was such a grounded version of Doc Ock that he made me appreciate the Doc Ock of the comics more. It was like a role reversal. Like, usually you love a character in the comics and then like you like the movie. I wasn't a big Doc Ock fan, and then Alfred Molina made him so good that I was. So I totally agree. Like, he transcended the source material. I think Alfred Molina's portrayal of the science aspect of it really helps you care about Spider-Man more. I think the second Spider-Man movie is amazing. I agree the nostalgia of the first one makes you feel a certain way, but I think everyone agrees amazing. I mean, Spider-Man 2 is the movie. Like, Spider-Man 2 is, 10 years plus old, and people still refer to it as one of the best of all time. And that was before its time. The stuff with Jonah in that movie, the suit, like, that movie is just so classic feeling, and it was so much fun to see Sam Raimi really be able to just fully use his style. Like, the full-on horror movie scene of his tentacles and stuff, with Max's dad pops up in there. John Landis is in that scene, which is always funny to me. Yeah, there's a little John Landis cameo in there. And that movie just has so much to say about the superhero genre. Like, it really was ahead of its time. Like, the scene with the train and the pathos and the power of Spider-Man and him getting carried, that Christ-like moment of him through the hall, and like all the New Yorkers like knowing he needed to protect his secret identity. All of that stuff was so powerful and moving and such vivid imagery. Like, right now you can picture so many of those frames. Like, you can picture so much of that movie, and that was a decade plus ago. That's so impressive. And arguably, you can't say that of a lot of movies now. Like, this amazing superhero like wave we're in right now, if you described a scene from like Thor Dark World, I'd be like, oh, I think, yeah, okay, sure. And that was like 5 years, you know what I mean? Like, Spider-Man 2 did it, man, in a real way.
Yeah, and it was interesting. Another thing with me with Doc Ock is that in Spider-Man 2, usually you expect the villain to be a guy who actually wants to destroy the world, and Doc Ock doesn't want to hurt the world. In fact, he wants the exact opposite. But by doing that, it's kind of like he's letting his own ambition take control of him, and that's sort of done in a way with the arms controlling him. But by the end, and it honestly makes me tear up whenever I think about it, Doc Ock actually ends up saving the world by sacrificing himself. And to do that as a supervillain character arc, that just hit me so freaking hard. And I still get teary-eyed whenever you see Alfred Molina's body just like floating away at the end, and it really works with the whole themes of that movie. So is that something you noticed on a first viewing, or did you have to like watch it a few times to really get it?
Well, I think it did a really good job knowing it was a sequel and knowing that it was a franchise. And it didn't fall into the we need to keep our hero and villains alive thing. You cared about Doc Ock the whole way through because you could tell this was a real person going through real problems. When they killed him, you really felt it. And you didn't think, like, what if he comes back? You felt he was gone, and you knew he had done that for the sake of the people. You knew the whole time Molina thought he was right. At no point was he mustache twirly. At no point was he like, I'm the bad guy. Like, and that was really cool and really unique. And I agree, like, every choice he made was from his point of view of being right and helpful. And it's really hard to do that in a movie where you care so much about Spider-Man. Like, obviously Spider-Man's the good guy, so how do you make the other bad guy good? Like, how do you do that? And that did it, man. Like, I really think any lesser actor than Alfred Molina, anyone else in that role might not have been able to do what he was able to pull off. So by the end, when he sacrificed himself, yeah, you were worried about Mary Jane. Yeah, you were worried about Spider-Man. But when he went, you felt it. And I didn't. I think I was slightly too young the first, watching. I think I was seeing it like, yay, action Spider-Man. Okay, good. But when you rewatch that thing now, man, you like, I agree. You cry. You break. It is powerful.
That'll wrap us on Spider-Man 2. Now we're going into one that is quite controversial amongst Spider-Man fans, and that's Spider-Man 3. Now, before we get into this, a little bit of a PSA here. I know that Spider-Man 3 has a lot of problems. Venom's one of them. A lot of the story elements don't really mesh together, but there's a lot of individual great things, I think, in this movie that sadly don't get as expanded upon because of the muddled structure, and I don't even blame Sam Raimi for that. Like you said before we even started, that it was the studio that was trying to like force in different things like Venom and that. So on a rewatch, how does Spider-Man 3 hold up for you? And is there any like moment that you think is individually great or should have been expanded upon more?
I think, and this is a very bold statement, that the Sandman, as portrayed by Thomas Hayden Church, is one of the best villains in comic book movie lore.
I completely agree with you.
So I don't think that the problem is you got Sandman in a movie and you got Venom in a movie. What are people going to talk about? It was obvious the studio was like, but Venom. Like, that was the problem. Like, I don't think the Sam Raimi's use of Venom was fair, man. Like, it was clear the studio wanted Venom, and he wrote this beautiful story for Sandman, and you have so much, he invested so much in Sandman. Obviously, everything else is going to feel shoehorned in. So I don't blame Sam Raimi for Spider-Man 3. I don't blame anyone. I think it had its problems. I think it got Batman and Robin-itis. I think it just had too much going on, and you just couldn't care about anyone enough. And I think they were trying to... The hype of the Ultimate Spider-Man line with that take on Eddie Brock isn't our Eddie Brock. Like, Ultimate Spider-Man is my single favorite line of comics. I'm not downplaying Ultimate Spider-Man, but you don't think about Eddie Brock as this parallel to Spider-Man in that way. You think of this guy who thinks he's doing stuff right and has this lethal protector vengeance. You don't think of Topher Grace. So Spider-Man 3 was never going to succeed in the way people wanted. It did this stupid thing where it was like, hey, what do the people want? Venom. What do we give them? Giant Venom. Like, that doesn't work. You're never going to be satisfied. And if it takes away from your actual villain, if you remove Sandman's gravitas because you're shoehorning in this Giant Venom, it's just going to piss everybody off. So I think looking back on it, not in the moment, not following Spider-Man 2, looking back on it with clear eyes after 20-some superhero movies, look at Sandman. That guy is fighting for survival. That guy is using his powers in such an interesting way. The way they designed Sandman was so cool. Thomas Hayden Church played the hell out of it. And if it wasn't for the freaking dancing emo Spider-Man, we'd remember it so fondly. You know what I mean? Like, there's a half of that movie that's so damn good. You're not going to remember that amazing scene of him, like, forming up for the first time and the swirling sand and all those individual pieces of CGI that they made look cool freaking 8 years ago or whatever. That was so powerful. But you're going to remember Spider-Man with his friggin' emo Green Day haircut dancing around the street, and that's really sad. There's a lot of good in that movie that doesn't get remembered. My take on Spider-Man 3 is like, but remember!
I'm glad that you brought up the Sandman birth scene, because that sequence is just so freaking beautiful. It's like something out of a Universal Monsters movie. And like the music, there's no dialogue, and it gives you all the feels. And you'd think with Sam Raimi being so prevailed in like horror with Evil Dead that he'd be able to do Venom and make it great, but I think his problem was he never found Venom to be that interesting of a character to begin with. And I do want to bring up a bit, because you brought up the Goblin legacy, Harry's new Goblin in here. I'm going to call him the new Goblin. I'm not calling him the Green Goblin. There are some parts of it that I totally get. Like, his character really works with the theme of forgiveness that I feel Spider-Man 3 has. But they do miss a lot of opportunities here, and I got really pissed off when they made Harry have amnesia, because you spend 2 movies building up this guy's sort of vengeance, and then you just kind of erase it and bring it back in such kind of a weird way towards the end. So do you feel like this movie could have worked with just Sandman and Harry as like 2 conflicting kind of parts with Peter's struggle in this movie? You don't even need the symbiote, in my opinion.
In my opinion, Spider-Man 3 would have been a great Sandman movie. Spider-Man 4 would have been a great Venom movie. Spider-Man 5 would have been a great Goblin Legacy movie. Spider-Man 3 being a Goblin Legacy Sandman Venom movie was never going to succeed. You don't read a Spider-Man annual and expect there to be 10 storylines that make sense. You expect there to be one story that makes sense. And that's a freaking annual. That's already a double-sized issue. You can't go into a movie following Spider-Man 2, make it 3 hours, and put 3 villains in. That's not the way it works. Like, I don't care how much ground you've laid. It's not fair to a single character to do that much to it. The Spider-Man symbiote saga should be a 3-film process. Spider-Man should have the symbiote in one movie, Venom should appear in another, and the conflict and then the resolution should appear in a third. Like, we can't understand the depths and horrors of having an alien entity take us over and play with all of our darkness in a dance scene. Like, I'm going to keep bringing up that damn dance scene, man. Like, the things you could do, what I would do in a Spider-Man symbiote movie is you have Spider-Man fighting a B-list villain in the opening, show the strength of Spider-Man, have him fight the Shocker, have him fight a cult favorite, and then have the symbiote happen at him. Either the Moonway, Church, I don't care how it happens. Spider-Man gets the symbiote. And then you deal with the pathos, the id and the ego of a man struggling with responsibility. What a concept! Spider-Man and responsibility! And not knowing how to use this newfound power for a whole movie. A whole movie! You don't just have it like as a question mark. You literally... There are great movies about struggling with newfound power. You've got a character that's already powerful getting more power. That's fascinating. And then you care about this new power structure, so when you introduce Eddie Brock, you already are invested in the symbiote. That's a second movie, man. Like, this movie was trying to do that, plus Sandman, plus Green Goblin, and Green Goblin deserves his time in the sun, man. Like James Franco's an incredible actor, but you cannot have him eat a pie and suddenly have us endear to him in a new movie. You can't have that pie scene be all the charm you get. Like, that's not fair to James Franco. And then at the same time, Thomas Hayden Church... The voice of Thomas Hayden Church is so charismatic and charming and fun, and the way he just played the Sandman is unlike anything I ever expected from the Sandman. I never... You tell 10-year-old me I'm going to care about the Sandman, I'm like, you're lying. Like, why not give each character their due? And that wasn't anyone's fault. It was Spider-Man 2 making $1 bazillion, and them knowing Venom had to be in the third one and wanting to make $3 bazillion, and then it did. That movie proved... If you put the character in there, it can be as crappy as it wants to be. Spider-Man 3 made all the money. So, it's got its merits, man, but, like, you can tell the studio was like, but what if? Times 10 every day, you know? And I don't blame anybody for it. I just think people get hungry, man. People get greedy when it comes to this stuff, and they didn't know what they had. And I think going forward, if anything can come out of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man 3, it's realizing that the characters are more important than the action set pieces. Don't give me a Lego action set piece. Give me a character study, and we'll see it. Logan is the movie to base the Venom saga off of. Give me remorse, give me pathos, give me rage, give me an experience. Don't give me an action set piece when it comes to that character, because that's what you're going to get Spider-Man 3 again.
Yeah, and I think now we can move on to The Amazing Spider-Man, which I'm not sure if you've heard the term phantom menacing, but that's something I feel like I did when I watched this movie, because I saw it when I was about 16. I was really excited. Andrew Garfield looked great. I was excited to see the Lizard. And the first time I saw it, I was like, well, that was a movie. And then I went into another screening to try watch it again so I could try convince myself that it was good. I've even bought it on Blu-ray to try convince myself it was good. I had to try convince my girlfriend at the time that it was good, and I just couldn't. There are some parts in The Amazing Spider-Man that I really like Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield's chemistry. It helps that they were dating in real life, and Mark Webb knows how to write those kind of relationship things, but there's one thing that really bugs me here, and that's the way they handled the Lizard.
So, Lizard and Vulture were supposed to be in Spider-Man 4, and Black Cat as well, because at this point they were like, what of everyone? And I think the problem that happened was, and the only thing I'm worried about with the Vulture in the upcoming is because the Vulture was supposed to be in Spider-Man 4, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4, is that they just kind of picked things up and just threw them in there. I feel like they had some script pages laying around. They're like, we'll throw these in this movie. They set up Dr. Connors in Spider-Man 2 and 3, and he was played incredibly, and he was fun. He was a science teacher. By the time we had this new revamped version of him, we don't really care about Lizard. You know what I mean? We just meet, reset the E15s, and you're not invested. So the Lizard works in the Spider-Man mythos because of the relationship between Peter Parker and Doc Connors. Without that, the Lizard's just a dinosaur, man. He's just not going to be interesting. So I don't care how much cool CGI you throw at me. If I don't care about the man behind the Lizard, I'm not going to care about the Lizard. The movie... The problem with Amazing Spider-Man is it happens at you, not with you. And that can never be forgiven. And especially with someone as capable and brilliant as Mark Webb. Like, Mark Webb, 500 Days of Summer and Gifted are two of the most emotionally wrecking movies you'll ever see. If you haven't seen Gifted yet, go see it. It will affect you for weeks. Gifted is powerful. The guy's last name is Webb. They gave him a Spider-Man movie, and somehow that happened. Like, Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield were so charming together because, like you said, there was a real relationship there. Those scenes were few and far between. I would much rather see a high school drama with those two than see an action movie with those two. And I feel like Sony just mishandled the character. Like, I feel like Sony saw what Marvel was doing and then just threw money at Spider-Man. They didn't throw money at Peter Parker. I feel like Mark Webb was trying to make a Peter Parker movie, the studio was trying to make a Spider-Man movie, and what we got was the lizard.
we got that green Voldemort lizard with... He only wears the lab coat in one scene.
Moments, the use of the Y-axis in that film, the 3D element, was incredible. If you watch that movie in 3D, it's one of the few movies where I actually got me to defend 3D. I would argue the use of the Y-axis in Amazing Spider-Man is better than the use of the Y-axis in the Avatar movies, and that's saying a hell of a thing. It is used incredibly, but that's not enough to make a movie with Y. It's a video game, and it just doesn't work for me.
Now, well, I think now we can get onto the Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I'm going to bring up the Phantom Menacing thing again.
Whew.
Electro was my favorite villain in Spider-Man comics for a long time because I love the idea of this guy who's somewhat written as like a bipolar kind of guy, and you give him like these electric powers and he's just going to go nuts. And I thought when they cast Jamie Foxx, I was psyched. Like, we're going to get to see Django go up against Spider-Man. But then they start bringing in all these other villains, like Paul Giamatti as the Rhino, and then Dane DeHaan as Green Goblin, and I was kind of like, okay, if you can balance these well, we might have a fun Spider-Man movie, but tragically that didn't come together. And there's parts of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 I like, even as hammy as he is, Jamie Foxx's Electro had some really great ideas behind him. I just don't think they were executed very well. I thought the idea of Rhino just being like this villain that shows up at the beginning was a nice, fun way to use him, because I've never really cared for that character, even in the comics. And coming off of Chronicle, Dane DeHaan as Harry Osborn I thought was a perfect choice, but then when you see him in the movie, you find that he's fine as Harry Osborn, but when he plays the Green Goblin, it just kind of goes full-on hammy style, and it's the same with Jamie Foxx's Electro. So where do you stand on Amazing Spider-Man 2?
I think every scene with Spider-Man being quippy and fun and just like, you know, the friendly neighborhood web-slinger, those scenes are great. You can tell they had some comedy punch-ups. I know they brought some comedians in. Spider-Man was funny, like actually funny in that movie. There's a lot of really cool like posing and posturing, and there's a lot of really cool like Spider-Man moments in that film. But you could probably edit a 15-minute short out of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. That'd be great. And that's not a movie, man. Like, there's some great moments. I wasn't big on Paul Giamatti's Rhino. The thing that makes the Rhino interesting is that he's trapped himself in the Rhino suit. Like, the thing that makes Rhino interesting is that he is a man who did something to himself and he can't escape it. He's not a guy that gets in and out of a mech suit. He's not a freaking Gundam. What was that choice? And then Green Goblin is a legacy character. Like, we've talked about that that word has come up many times in this because that is the Osborn legacy. That is the point of the Osborns, is the longevity of the character. How do you expect to introduce the second Goblin without the first, and then introduce Harry as if they've known each other, but like he's never mentioned before, and the scene of them meeting feels like they literally hadn't met? Like, I feel like Andrew Garfield and Dane DeHaan hadn't met in that scene yet. It's the opposite of what... Harry Osborn only works if he's known Peter forever. And Green Goblin only is affecting Spider-Man because he doesn't want to hit him because it's his friend. If you've got this nefarious Chronicle Dane DeHaan, who I love Dane DeHaan, you can't introduce Harry in a movie and make him Green Goblin in the same movie. That's not how it works. I agree with what you're saying, that Dane DeHaan had the Harry moments that were great, but he's not the Green Goblin, and that's because of the legacy aspect. And Electro, man, like... I just didn't buy Jamie Foxx, and that was a problem. Like, I just never felt... I feel like Jamie Foxx was mustache twirling, and I hate when villains do that. I hate when he plays them bad, and Jamie Foxx never felt like he had real goals. He never felt like he was really evil. He just felt like he was playing evil, and that's not fun. That's not a movie. Some of the set pieces were cool. The Times Square thing was fun. it had moments, but it felt like it did all of the mistakes of Spider-Man 3 over again, but with more pizzazz. It was like, what if we put $100 million more into Spider-Man 3? Like, it just felt like a bigger wrong direction. And then some of the reshoots they did, the dad coming at the end of the cemetery scene, all of the stuff they tried to shoehorn in with Peter Parker's family, there's just so much wrong with that little franchise, man. It was 2 movies, and as an optimist, I'm going to thank it for existing because it got us the Marvel companion deal. It's just, I feel so bad for Andrew Garfield. I've never seen a fan that big become his superhero and then have it be, like, abused in front of him. I feel like the only person more upset about The Amazing Spider-Man than fans is Garfield, because he not only was a fan, but he was in the damn thing. So I just feel bad that we never got to see Andrew Garfield play Spider-Man, because he's perfect, man. That guy looks like him, he acts like him, he walks the walk, talks the talk. It's just a real shame that Sony mishandled the writing and the story and the plot, and, everything.
Well, thank God that you brought up Homecoming there, because I think that's where we're going to be heading next. And it's only a trailer, but we've also got his scene in Civil War, and you said Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man we've gotten. What was your reaction like to that Peter Parker scene in Civil War?
So I was lucky enough to see an early screening of Civil War. I saw it before the masses by about a month, and I was so glad to not have got the amount of hype that everyone else did, because I went in completely, like, skeptical and nervous and apprehensive, and I didn't know where he was going to pop up. I knew nothing except Spider-Man, And the trailers hadn't started coming out with him all over them. There was little tidbits, but there wasn't the amount we got by the end. The moment I saw a kid walking down a hallway holding a VCR, I was like, I lost my mind, dude. I had no idea how excited I could be about a Spider-Man. It made me feel the same way Sam Raimi's did the first time when I was 13. A movie made me feel like a 13-year-old kid seeing his hero on screen again. And I saw that movie so many times in theaters, sometimes just going to watch the reactions of people around me. Like, I literally got to see, like, kids. I got to see kids see a hero born on screen. I got to see an entire new generation get their Spider-Man. This was a kid playing a kid for kids, and that's what Spider-Man is, man. He's not Iron Man. He's not Thor. He's a guy trying to do what's right. He is the ultimate underdog, and I got to see people get their hero. And there is no greater feeling as a Spider-Man fan than seeing a Spider-Man fan be born. It was like childbirth for a hero. It was amazing. So I think Tom Holland, his referential reality, like on Instagram, that kid is Spider-Man. Like, he just, like, Tom Holland is Peter Parker, and that shows in every frame. You can tell I'm not as big on the whole Spider-Man as Tony Stark thing Dan Slott does in the comics. I'm not as big on the whole, like, he's a world, like, traveling, like, that's not Spider-Man to me. So the last 5 years in the Spider-Man comics has not worked for me, to be dead honest. But the mentorship angle they're taking in this works for me, because that keeps Spider-Man the underdog, and it keeps all the Iron Spider fans happy. It keeps all the people that love that relationship. And I think they're going to be doing a very interesting thing with the almost father-like role Downey Jr. is taking. I think they're going to do a very interesting thing keeping the tech suit there. I think what they're doing is giving us, like, a greatest hits. You know what I mean? It's like, now that's what I call Spider-Man. It's giving us the every version of Spider-Man we want to see, and I think that Homecoming, as long as it isn't trying to be Marvel's Avengers, Spider-Man, which the trailer did portray, we're going to be great. And I think the trailer had to give us that so that we can have all the giant Avengers fans see the movie and all the people that love Downey Jr. see the movie. And I understand why they market it that way. I just hope it's more, Spider-Man, than Avengers stuff. You know what I mean? And I just think it's a marketing issue, but I'm so excited, man. I've never been this excited for a Spider-Man movie as an adult.
Yeah, I mean, from Homecoming, I just want a few things. I just want to see a movie about Spider-Man as a teenager, going up against people like the Vulture, the Shocker, and the Tinkerer. It doesn't need to be like a huge villain. And Bokeem Woodbine, the Shocker outfit looks great. I'm really digging the look of Michael Keaton's Vulture, and kind of like the angle they're taking with him, like the everyman sort of thing. Like, I know Vulture's kind of portrayed as like a businessman in the comics, but the everyman angle kind of adds like a fresh new take to him. And we haven't seen a lot of Tinkerer yet, but I imagine he's going to be sort of like just like the brains behind the operation. Maybe the guy who's just, well, for lack of a better word, tinkering with all the stuff.
Well, what we can do with this is the problem The Amazing Spider-Man had was that everything came out of Oscorp. Every freaking thing. It was very frustrating. The thing you can do with Tinker is you can have him have that, but make it make sense. In the early Ditko comics, the Tinker was behind a lot of villains, and it makes sense that if you're dealing with these crazy technological things, there'd be a guy that's a specialist. Especially if you're involving, like, it looks like they're involving, like, the alien technology in it. So it'd be cool if there's one guy that specializes in alien technology. It gives you a chronology, it gives you something to tie these villains together, it gives you a lot of mythology built in one, and that's the way to do it. So that way they do tie together. And I think the Shocker is a great introductory villain. I think the Vulture is going to be a lot of fun. I think Michael Keaton's going to have a hell of a time playing him. And freaking Donald Glover, man, you put Donald Glover in a movie and I'm there. I'm hoping he's the Prowler.
Same here.
That would make a lot of sense for the character. I think what they're doing with the villains this way around is the right way to go. I just hope that it gives us enough Spider-Man time. I just hope we get... if I were to cast Tom Holland and I was going to write a Spider-Man series, I would look at Boyhood and I would look at Harry Potter. And I would shape the movies like I was going to have 8 years of Spider-Man. 8 movies of Spider-Man. Not 2, not 3. I want like a series of growing up with Spider-Man through the ages and starting as like a sophomore, junior in high school is the way to do it. So I'm hoping they go that route. And I hope... I'm actually okay with Sony and Marvel only having a deal for 3 movies, because if it goes back to Sony with the right start, with the right head on its shoulders, then we'll get those independent Spider-Man movies, and we'll get to have... The only way superhero fatigue happens is if all the movies feel the same, and if they all go Avengers, they're going to all start to feel the same. Then the bubble will burst. If we have the dichotomy of the world-ending stuff in Avengers and a little tiny contained stuff in high school, we'll get our Spider-Man. We'll get our cake and eat it too. And I want to eat Spider-Man cake.
Well, I think that's about ready to wrap us up, and I've got a couple questions from fans here, because a lot of people know I've been excited to have you on ever since you retweeted my tweet. I've been like buzzed as hell. So there's 2 here that I can kind of connect to each other. At Eric Monroe, at MM says, who's your favorite Spider-Man villain? And Deezus from Deezus Takes the Reel, I've been on his podcast as well. He's a really great guy. Says, regardless of whether they've been in a movie or not, what's your dream cast for a Spider-Man villain? Because I've got a couple for that too.
Okay, so my all-time favorite Spider-Man villain is tricky because I like him for a myriad of reasons. I love Carnage. Because I feel like Carnage is a very cool parallel to the Joker. I feel like he's a being of pure chaos. He's a guy that does things out of madness, and I think that's a really fun dichotomy to Spider-Man. This is a character who's based in responsibility, and this guy's doing it for the opposite of responsibility. He likes insanity. He leans into it, so that's fun to play with. I don't feel like they've ever written him the way that I see him, though. It's really interesting that my favorite character... So, it's a character I love that I think is handled poorly. So it's like not fair to call him my favorite, because I see his potential more than I see his execution. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I also love that he's based off of, like, the shred of Venom. Like, I love that Venom is literally... The idea of Venom as the antithesis to Spider-Man is always fun. To go one step further with Carnage is amazing. Like, that character has the most potential. I don't know if he's my favorite as an adult, but he's the character that I always wanted to be better. I love Shocker, because I think he's just a simple, like, it's a cool thing to see happen. Now, the character I want to see most in movies is not a character I actually like in the comics. So this is another tricky one. Mysterio, I think, would be the character that is the best for a medium that isn't comics. The thing about Mysterio is you can make an Inception film. You can make a mind warp, crazy, alternate reality, change the way you perceive cinema movie that doesn't translate in 2D. The thing about movies versus comics is some things work better in comics, some things work better in movies. So if you're going to make a movie, pick a character that's made for the cinema. Pick a guy who's a special effects movie-goer and put him in a freaking movie. Like, that's the way I'd go. I think Vulture's a good start because you can have a lot of fun with the aerials. You can have a lot of fun with, like, things we haven't seen yet. But I think Mysterio could literally change the superhero genre because you'd have all of the size change madness of Ant-Man. You'd have all the crazy warping visuals of Doctor Strange. You'd have all of the second-guessing your own reality of Inception in a character that makes sense in canon for Spider-Man. It's right there. So I think he'd be a lot of fun. I want to see Ben Foster as Carnage. I want to see Sam Witwer as Venom. I want to see... I think Neil Patrick Harris would be a really fun Mysterio.
That'd be cool.
Neil Patrick Harris, he has that fun guy in a suit hijinks meets the darkness of Gone Girl with a little shade of mischief like he does in Series of Unfortunate Events. I think NPH as Mysterio would be a game changer. And I also would love to see Craven. I'd do Craven two ways. I would either do a full dark, we've got Spider-Man, we've had Tom Holland for 8 movies, we've experienced maybe the Clone Saga, I know I said it, we've experienced maybe the Venom Saga, and then we have Kraven's Last Hunt, and then you have a serious Kraven. You cast, he played Anton Chigurh.
Javier Bardem.
You cast Javier Bardem or someone of his ilk, that darkness, that like heaviness, and you go Kraven's Last Hunt, or you do the ultimate route and you have a reality TV star that literally is running out of things to hunt, and you go full crazy, just fun and silly, and you get Gerard Butler.
Those are both great choices. I mean, you got Craven there, Mysterio there, Neil Patrick Harris, and all that. I had 2 other choices for those as well for myself. I've always thought Zachary Quinto would be great for Mysterio, because he's got that kind of like.
He looks like him. That looks like Ditko, that haircut. Yeah, visually, that's on point, man.
And for Craven, it's a bit of a weird choice. It's a bit of a left field one, but it's just because he's kind of looks like Craven in a way, and he has a really good acting ability. I think give him a couple years. Kit Harington from Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, dude, I see that. My third, and he's kind of like a middle ground. You can do any Craven with him. Idris Elba.
Whoa, well, he'll be playing both Heimdall and Craven, but I don't care. I'd be down for that.
Idris Elba with a lion's mane draped around his shoulders, hunting you.
I do want to see that, actually, now that you mention it.
Idris Elba as Craven is like my pocket aces, man. This is the first time I've ever mentioned him as a fan cast. Idris Elba is my Craven deep down.
Okay, well, we've got some great fan casts here, and my buddy Randall Sands asks, besides Peter Parker, who is your favorite Spider-Man in comics?
Okay, this is easily the most controversial opinion I have as a Spider-Man fan. I am a diehard Ben Reilly fan. I think Ben Reilly is next to Deadpool, I think is one of the most fun characters to come out of the 90s weirdness, because you have the 70s where everything's groovy and cool and characters are fun. You have the 60s where they're all square and they're trying to figure out what teenhood is and everybody's elbows and knees. You've got the 80s where drugs are fucking everywhere. Like, 80s is cocaine madness, and the comics reflected that with Beyonder and stuff. The 90s was like, comics always reflect their time, right? So the 90s was like pouches and accessories, and there was 100 comics of everything. And literally, Ben Reilly is kind of like the epitome of the 90s. He's literally a duplicate to a character we love that dyes his hair blonde and is trying to figure out his own identity. Like, as much as the 90s was an identity crisis for the country, like, America had an identity crisis, Spider-Man has an identity crisis by having a clone. Like, what an amazing, telling version of reality that the most beloved character in comics suddenly doesn't know if he's real. Like, what a fascinating character study that is. So the idea that, like, you go through this entire experience, Spider-Man's finally maturing into himself, and then he's like, what if I'm not real? That's amazing. And then Ben Reilly being literally like this coffee shop working, blonde-haired, like charming, confident version of Spider-Man. We've never had that. Spider-Man's always had, like, he's had Mary Jane, a supermodel girlfriend, and he's still like, am I worthy? Then you've got Ben Reilly being like, you know who's great? This guy. After going on like this crazy walkabout, growing a beard, and living in the lost years of like, he literally like drove a motorcycle through the country and then like discovered himself. Like, what a fun character study on the other side of being Spider-Man. And there's no way we could have gotten that through regular chronology. So I think Ben Reilly's take on power, responsibility, redemption, self-discovery, it was like getting a new Spider-Man while having our old one. And I think Ben Reilly embodies Spider-Man in a lot of ways that other characters can't. And I really don't like what they're doing with him in the comics right now. I don't like that he's a villain, that he's the Jackal. It hurts me as a Ben Reilly fan. I think it goes against everything Ben Reilly stands for. Ben Reilly literally sacrificed himself to the Green Goblin to save Peter Parker and save everyone in that building. And, like, that was powerful, man. To see Ben Reilly disintegrate after 20 years of wondering if he was real or not was one of the most impactful images of any comic ever. It was on Halloween. You've got all the Goblin lore. You've got the legacy of the Green Goblin tied into the legacy of Ben Reilly. It's art, man. That was a beautiful end to a beautiful story. There were a lot of problems with the Clone Saga because it had 18 writers that all didn't know they were writing it. And then they're like, oh no, it's selling. What if this goes on for 4 extra years? Like, that's not its fault. It got Spider-Man 3'd. No one wants to get Spider-Man 3. But I think Ben Reilly deserves more credit when he's written well. And I think Ben Reilly is a great Spider-Man. And the Scarlet Spider costume, a freaking red spandex suit with a blue sweatshirt over it, is dope, man. I just got that freaking Sharpie spider on it. Like, I love that suit. I love that Spider-Man.
I love that in the Homecoming trailer as well. And we've got one more question here. I think you're going to like this one Because I know you are also you worked as an actor.
Yeah, I am. I'm in that thing where I'm like older than high school and younger than dad, so I'm like that weird, like, I'm not like CW teenager age. So hosting's been a really rad outlet while I get a grown man face.
My friend Billy Polahan at B-Buster Bill says, if you could play any Spider-Man character, who would it be and why?
Ooh, that is a great question.
I could see you as Shocker, actually, now that I think about it.
Dude, Shocker would be so much fun. I think, Ben Reilly would be fun, depending on who they cast as Spider-Man. Obviously, I'd want the same actor to play him, because I have so many opinions on Ben Reilly, so it'd be really fun to, like, coach the actor on Ben Reilly. As far as playing a character in Spider-Man, I would love to be Flash Thompson. I think it'd be really fun to love Spider-Man and think I hate Peter Parker, but then reluctantly really respect Peter Parker down the road. It'd be a really fun character arc as an actor to go from puny Parker, oh no, I need his help with Tess, I have to beat him up because I'm insecure and I like this girl that he likes, and like the character's just so insecure, but he's got a heart of gold. Like, Flash Thompson truly is like this great American hero that hides his insecurities with being a bully. And there's nothing more telling, especially in the time that he was written. Like, that was the age of bullies and all that silliness. I think Flash Thompson is like a beautiful arc of a character where he grows into himself, and like he's a supporting character that has more about him than a lot of lead characters. Like, you can dive into Flash Thompson a lot. So as an actor, I'd love to portray Flash as fully fledged as he is, because he's a Venom at later on, and it'd be getting to play Venom and a bully and a character that loves Spider-Man, and I love Spider-Man, so it'd be easy to play.
You should give Tony Revolori a call. I've actually talked to him on Screen Junkies. He's a very nice guy.
Oh, he's great. Tony's a great guy. I'm happy to see his portrayal of him, but I know my portrayal of Flash Thompson has I've got a lot of ideas about how I'd want to play it. So, I mean, Eddie Brock is the dream. Everybody wants to play Eddie Brock. That'd be so much fun to literally be a character made of vengeance. And the way I'd play Venom, literally like every decision I made was right, even if it seemed crazy, because the Lethal Protector concept would be so much fun. And gaining like 100 pounds of muscle and have someone pay me to do it, hell yeah. So Eddie Brock or Flash Thompson are my two dreams.
I'm glad that you've never seen the show before, because this will be even more of a surprise to you. I want you to imagine that I've never seen a Spider-Man movie, and which is really hard to believe because I never shut up about the damn character. But what do you tell me to get me to watch any Spider-Man film?
Imagine you are a kid growing up in New York. You're a teenager, you don't know what your life looks like, you're trying to figure everything out, and then imagine you are suddenly granted powers beyond your wildest dreams, but you still feel guilty about something and you're not sure what direction to take your life in. And then imagine you're Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a character that's you. You get to be this person. You get to look out through his eyes. You get to understand what it's like to be a hero, but you still are a real person. There's nothing about you that changes. You are literally you, but with spider powers. And that is the experience of Spider-Man. That is what it's like to be Spider-Man. It's the most underdog, like mine, common everyday man character in the world. And you still have all your responsibilities. You still can't pay rent. You still got to be a photographer or a pizza boy or whatever it is you're doing day to day, depending on the movie you're watching. You've got to be that guy. And you also get to swing through the air, man. You get to make jokes. You get to try to like cover it all up, and you get a pretty hot girl at the end. So life's not bad. Spider-Man movies.
And I think that'll wrap us up on what I believe is now the longest episode of Movies and Me. Coy, you're already setting records for me, buddy. So
for a while, man. It was a long time coming.
And dude, once again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and also I want to thank Jack Shipley for helping me set this up, because I know you're a busy guy out there in LA, and to be able to have you on my show that I've started about a month ago, you have no idea how much that means to me, dude. This has been a great episode. So where can the good people find you, and is there anything you want to plug?
You can find me at CoyJandreau, that's my name, on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find me over at Screen Junkies fairly often. I love those guys. I host Marvel Movie News every Tuesday, live at 2:30, and the live chat's fun. I love talking to people. I love community. I love people. So the internet gives you amazing access to humans, and that's my favorite part of it. So please tweet and talk and live chat. And I'll be going to Comic-Con, which is soon after this, so that'll be a fun journey. And yeah, I love you guys. The internet's been rad to me, so seek me out.
All right, and as always, you can find me at Nolan Dean 27 and use the hashtag Movies and Me to help continue the conversation. Next week, Jonathan Youngblood joins us to talk The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which of course, that's a movie I expected him to pick. I even made a thumbnail for him in advance. So can't wait to get into that. So if you guys like this episode, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.